All right, guys, so we are back for 2.4 to 2.7 review. So that means that we're dealing with two-step and multi-step inequalities. We're also dealing with some of those fabulous variables on both sides, your absolute value inequalities, and those compound inequalities, okay? So this is gonna be a little bit of a longer lesson, so we will do one problem each. We'll do one problem each lesson, and then you guys can always hop onto my office hours if you have any other questions, and we can work on more problems together there. But just for time's sake, for the video length and how long it takes to do each problem, we're gonna go ahead and just do one of each, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and start out with our two-step and multi-step inequalities. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose a pretty decent one, I guess. So we have m plus 3 over 2 is greater than negative 4. So when I'm looking at this type of an equation, or inequality, excuse me, okay, I can't do anything with this top part until I remove this 2. So if we look at it, this whole grouping here is doing the operation of division. So that means to get rid of that 2, I need to multiply both sides by 2. Doing that on this side gets rid of it, so that leaves me with just the m plus 3 that I want, and then greater than negative 4 times 2 would give me the negative 8. Okay, so that's one step. Here's where our second step is going to come in, because I still need to get that variable all by itself. So again, I want to remove the 3. So I'm going to do my inverse operations of that and subtract 3 from both sides. And that's going to give me the m all by its lonesome, greater than negative 8 minus 3 is going to give me an even further negative, so negative 11. Now, if I wanted to graph this, just for remembering sake, I know I'm going to need to put a open circle over negative 11, and I'm going to be shading all the way to the right, because that tells me that all numbers that are greater than negative 11 are going to work for this inequality that we started with, okay? We will go ahead now to your inequalities with variables on both sides. So this is 2.5. Okay, so we have 4c minus 7 is greater than 9c plus 8. So it doesn't matter which side I want to have my variables on, but remember that when you have your variables to the right, to the left, where they're beginning your inequality, it makes it easier for you to talk about your solutions. It also makes it easier for you to graph. So even though I'm going to end up with a negative by moving this 9 to the other side, it's going to help me in the end to really know what my solution values are. So I'm going to move the 9c by doing its opposite, or its inverse. Remember, that's a positive 9c, so to remove it, I'm going to have to subtract it. So I'm going to get rid of it here. 4 minus 9 is going to give me a negative 5c. I'm going to go ahead and bring down everything that I did not work with in that step. Now, since I've designated all of my variables to this side, I need to move this constant value to the other side to join with the 8. So if this is a subtracting 7, that means that to move it over, I need to add 7. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 7 to both sides here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the negative 5c down, the greater than, and by combining these together, I get a positive 15. Still not done yet. I still want to get this c again all by itself. So I need to follow that inverse operation of getting this negative 5 away, keeping in mind that I'm going to be dividing by a negative number, which means this sign is no longer going to be greater than once I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by that negative 5, both sides. This gets canceled. I bring down the c. I've divided by a negative, which means I've changed this to a less than, and 15 divided by negative 5 is going to give me a negative 3. So I'm going to give you a little disclaimer right now. Sorry if you can hear the lawn people mowing in the back. Okay, They weren't doing anything when I started this video, but of course halfway in is when they decide to cut the backyard. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and ignore that, and we're gonna go on to 2.6. Now, 2.6 deals with your compound inequalities. Of course, now it doesn't want to go to the next page. All right, give me 1 second while I work with this HRW that does not want to switch a page now. All right, well again, while I'm getting that all set, remember that you are dealing with compound inequalities that are and or, okay? So that means that you're either gonna have solutions that are going in the same direction where they're going to overlap their solutions, or you're gonna have the ors, which are gonna be going in opposite directions, okay? So they won't have an overlapping solution set, they're gonna have their own solutions, which means it's either gonna work for one inequality or it's gonna work for the other, but not both, okay? So here we go. All right, there we go. Now it wants to work. So I'm gonna be dealing with my first example, which is -4 less than t plus 6 less than 10. So if you look at this compound inequality, you see how these two are going in the same direction. This is going to give you a hint that this is an and compound inequality. Because by leaving that variable in the middle, it's going to be greater than the left side, but less than the right side. So I want to get that t by itself, so I'm going to move the 6, so I'm going to subtract the 6. I'm still following that same inverse operations. Now the only thing you have to remember is that when you move it from here, you also have to remove it from both sides. Okay? So by doing that, I get -4 minus 6, which is going to give me a -10. I'm going to bring down the inequality, the t value, the other inequality, and then I'm going to do the 10 minus 6, which is going to give me 4. So that tells me that this t value has to be greater than -10, but less than 4. So that means that if I graph it, so I'm going to put -10 all the way down here, and I'm going to put a 4 over here. Yeah, the scaling's not really exact, but we're going to work with it. So we're dealing with less than and less than, which means that both of these numbers are going to get open circles, which means that even though my t value can go to -10 or 4, those two numbers are not included. So if I look here, t is greater than -10 and less than 4, which means that their solution falls anywhere in between here, and only in between there. Doesn't work for any numbers that are greater than 4 or less than -10, or -10 and 4. Just remember those key parts. So we'll do an or real quick, just to remember what they look like when they're graphed, okay? All right, so let's deal with 3 less than s plus 9, or 1 greater than s minus 4. Now this gives you a real big hint that it's an or because they tell you right in there, okay? So we're gonna have to solve each one on its own. So we'll start with the first one here. So I know I need to get that s value all by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 9, same thing as always. And I'm going to end up with a, I'm going to have to clean my desk later. 3 minus 9 is going to give me a -6 less than s. Now here, I need to add that 4 to both sides. So I'm going to bring my little or here, and I'm going to put 5 greater than s. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this one just because I personally like seeing the variable first. So I'm going to change it to s less than 5. Okay? So now if I were to graph those two, so I'm going to put my -6 down here. Let me switch this one too. That's why it looked all weird. So we have s greater than negative 6. That still doesn't work right. Anywho, I feel like I wrote something wrong. Hold on. So s is greater than negative 6, or s is less than 5. All right, well, we're just going to keep going. I don't really think it ends up being an or, because if I put an open circle, it's going to actually connect together. Because I have s greater than negative 6 or s less than 5. Do you guys see a mistake in here somewhere? Anyways, so we're going to go ahead and leave it just like that. If you guys see a mistake here, email me, because I feel like something's a little off. But we're going to keep going. Anyways, so let's go ahead on to our absolute value inequalities. So remember, with our absolute value inequalities, these are going to give us compound inequalities in the end. Okay, so we're going to start off here. Absolute value of x minus 7 less than or equal to 15. Okay, remember that when we are dealing with absolute value equations, that when we isolated our absolute value expression, we had to split it into two equations where we only put the opposite, like the original and the opposite of the answer. Remember that when we're dealing with inequalities, we still do that, but we also have to flip the inequality sign for our second inequality, okay? So first I'm going to isolate my absolute value expression, which is the absolute value of x. So that means I'm going to move this 7 to the other side. So I get the absolute value of x less than or equal to 15 plus 7 gives me a 22, okay? So for here, I'm going to choose my original as my first one, so x less than or equal to 22. My second one is going to be the same x, flipping that inequality sign, and that gives me a negative 22. Remember that you have to do both, okay? So if I look at this, I'm talking about x being less than or equal to 22, greater than or equal to negative 22. What type of inequality, compound inequality, do you think I'm going to have? Yep, you guessed it, this is going to be an and compound inequality, because it's going to be a solution set that overlaps in between. Remember, you can tell this by your beginning inequality sign. So if when you start with your inequality, it starts with a less than or equal to, you're going to be dealing with an and compound inequality. If you start with a greater than or equal to, you're going to end with an or compound inequality. It's just a kind of a side note or shortcut for knowing which one it is, okay? So we'll do one more of your absolute values with an extra step included. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll do x plus 4 greater than 8. So going off of what I just said, hopefully you were listening, if I have a greater than sign, what kind of compound inequality am I dealing with? Yep, if you heard me correctly, we're dealing with an or compound inequality. So again, we're going to be starting out with isolating our absolute value expression. Good thing, already isolated. So I'm going to go ahead and split this into the two. So my first one's going to be the exact original inequality without the brackets. So I have x plus 4 is greater than 8. My other one is going to be x plus 4. I'm going to flip the sign to less than. Sorry, that glare. And then it's going to be a negative 8. So I'm going to solve this one first. I'm going to subtract the 4 from both sides. Lovely. I get x is greater than 4. And then here, I'm going to do the same exact thing because it makes my life easier. And I'm going to do x less than, now going to the further negatives, negative 12. So notice that. We're dealing with a number that's greater than 4 or less than negative 12, which means if I were to graph these two lovely numbers, I'm gonna start with negative 12 here, 4, okay? Now they get open circles because again, they're not greater than or less than or equal to. They're just regular. So I'm gonna do that one, which is the less than here, this one, which is the greater than there, and we are all set. Notice this big old gap in the middle. They don't have overlapping solution points. They go in opposite directions. So it's either gonna work for one side or it's gonna work for the other side, but it's never gonna work for both, okay? So again, if you guys have any questions regarding any of the 4 lessons that we went through today, hop on to either today's office hours or for the rest of this week. Remember that today you are finishing up, let me see. Nope, you are just finishing up anything that you have outstanding, or if you want to go ahead and start what the rest of this week has, go back to Friday's video to see your weekly layout for this week. Remember, you have a quiz on Thursday. That's going to be chapters 1 to 2. So you're dealing with solving equations and solving inequalities. So just review over the videos, review over any work you have, and I look forward to seeing you guys later. Bye.